Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 84, A Scare in the Air. The episode begins with Ash and the gang having stopped at a store to get some supplies before they officially head off to Valencia Island. Brock was currently reading a guidebook while him and Misty were waiting for Ash to come out of the store, and the guidebook essentially talked about the numerous beaches and potential tourists that you could meet, a lot of them being beautiful girls, which obviously excited Brock, being Brock. Misty then commented on how she wanted to get to the island so that she could suntan, just as she had said in the last episode. She informs Ash of this when he comes out of the store with all the groceries, and Ash responds that they wouldn't be able to get there that quickly as it took about a month to walk. This leaves Misty disappointed, but then Brock, still reading his guidebook, reads about how there were actually blimps that could get you to the island in less than a day. This excites Ash and Misty, as it meant that they didn't have to spend days walking through more forests for once. However, Brock clarifies that the blimp came at a hefty price, which they could definitely not afford. Maybe they could afford it, however, as coincidentally, two men were running a promotion for the store, likely because it was fucking dying, being in the middle of nowhere, and stated that if you simply showed them your receipt of a purchase from the restaurant, then you would be entered in for a chance to win a prize. Now, this obviously sounds like a scam, but then Ash and the gang spot a woman and her daughter going up to the stand, and when they show a receipt, they proceed to win a set of kitchen magnets, indicating that you did win a prize after all. To make things even more convenient for Ash and the gang, the next prize is then declared as a free ticket to go on a blimp, heading for Valencia Island. Brock and Misty are still skeptical, but Ash, being the impulsive guy that he was, instantly decides to enter, and when he does, he actually manages to win the raffle, therefore winning the trip on the blimp, much to Misty and Brock's shock. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was in the forest, and they were not plotting to steal Pikachu this time, no. They were talking to Giovanni over the computer. Giovanni had just informed them that he was now transferring them out of the stealing Pokemon business part of the organization, and instead to the blimp sector, implying that Team Rocket had used blimps to get around at some point, so they needed someone to manage them. Thinking that this would be a job that was a lot easier and a lot more fun, that they could do while still, of course, having the chance to steal Pokemon. Team Rocket are very, very grateful as they thank Giovanni, and he quickly hangs up, being annoyed by their constant thanks. Giovanni then reveals to his Persian, as he laughs, that he didn't in fact just give Jesse and James an easier job or a promotion. No, the reason why he transferred them to the blimp sector was because the blimp sector had been dead for years, and all the blimps had been neglected. So, if Team Rocket tried to board one, then that would mean that the blimp would likely crash, killing them. That's right, Giovanni had come up with this plan, all to kill members of his organization. Very smart. The only smart part about Giovanni's plan here was that he actually kept insurance on the blimp, so even if Team Rocket died, the blimp would still get insurance. Ash and the gang then approach the blimp field, where they spot their blimp, and maybe they were caught in a scam after all, as the blimp appears to be broken down, obviously because it was likely owned by Team Rocket. And Giovanni had stated that all the blimps were broken down. But anyways, when Misty complains about how bad shape the blimp looked, Ash retorts that she was the one who wanted to get there super fast anyway, so take it or leave it, adding that it would probably be fine. Just as they're about to board the blimp, two airfield workers then come up to them, implying that there was actual people maintaining the blimps after all. If that was the case, why were they so fucking damaged? But anyways, they must have just been bad at their jobs or something, being too busy gossiping, as the only thing that they do is tell Ash and the gang about a rumor about the blimp they were heading on, that it was haunted by ghosts. Ash and the gang are obviously freaked out by this, but then Jesse and James, disguised as a pilot and an airfield attendant, managed to convince Ash and the gang to board by lying that the two workers were actually just from a rival blimp company, and they wanted to tarnish this blimp's reputation. Meowth watches from the distance, spying on Ash and the gang as Jesse and James load them on to the blimp, as he assumes that Giovanni actually had a different reason for putting Jesse and James on blimp duty, which was so that they could actually steal Ash's Pikachu, as he knew that Ash would be riding a blimp. However, Team Meowth was obviously wrong about this. It was the polar opposite. He didn't entrust them due to trusting them to get Ash's Pikachu, no. He entrusted them on here so he could fucking kill them. Anyways, Jesse and James push the two airfield workers aside and get on the blimp right after Ash and the gang. But then suddenly, Jigglypuff makes an appearance, and it spots the lever that would empty out the ballast tanks, therefore rising the blimp, and it mistakes the lever for its microphone. So it goes up to it and tries to grab it, and when it does, it ends up unleashing the water from the ballast tanks and making the blimp rise. All of the water from the ballast tanks proceeds to fall on Jigglypuff, which disables it from being able to get away from the blimp as it takes off, and in the process, it gets caught in a rope that was attached to the blimp, meaning that Jigglypuff takes off as well. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were now inside the blimp, and despite Ash's assurance that the blimp would be fine, it in fact wasn't, as not only was the outside damaged, but the inside was utterly destroyed as well. The chandelier was broken, the windows were shattered, the rugs were ripped up. It was a fucking disaster. To make matters worse, the floor then collapsed on Ash, creating a hole. I guess it wouldn't be a Team Rocket blimp if holes weren't involved. However, unlike Team Rocket's holes, this hole had no bottom, so Ash was just hanging on for dear life, hoping not to fall into the aimless sky, and thankfully Misty and Brock were able to pull him back up in time. Brock and Misty then realized how weird it was that they were already up in the sky, as the attendants hadn't warned them at all, and that was the entire job of a flight attendant, was to make sure you knew what was going on. Well, it was revealed that Jesse and James didn't warn them, not only because they didn't know that the blimp was in the air, because it mistakenly was lifted into the air early by Jigglypuff, but they were also too busy making dinner, along with Meowth. Well, really, Meowth was the one who made the recipe. They were just the waiters. Jesse then finds Ash and the gang and informs them that dinner was ready as they proceed to sit down and eat the meal, which was nothing but soup. Brock comments on how it was ice cold, and James simply rebuttals that it was because it was an Eskimo recipe. So in order to stay true to tradition, they made it super cold. Ash and the gang are obviously about to complain about how stupid this logic was, but instead, they complain about why the fuck the blimp was tipping, as the blimp proceeds to tip, almost knocking them out of their seats. Team Rocket assure that they'll go find out the reason why, as they run over into the kitchen, confronting Meowth, assuming that he would know, as he would have to be the one flying the blimp, right, if it was in the air, because they weren't. Meowth then responds like, well, if you knew I was in the kitchen, then I obviously couldn't be flying the blimp either. So if I'm not flying the blimp, you guys aren't flying the blimp, who the fuck's flying the blimp? So the three of them go into the pilot compartment, only to discover that no one was flying the blimp, and that explained the tipping. Now, this begs several questions. For one, how would Team Rocket not have met the pilot of the blimp at this point? Like, you think that they would have realized, hey, there's no pilot here. That's kind of weird. Like, I know the blimp took off before they could meet a potential pilot, but wouldn't they have met the pilot before it took off anyway? So they should have been suspicious that Giovanni hadn't sent them a pilot or nothing. Or, now that I think about it, the more likely scenario was that one of either Jesse or James was supposed to be the pilot, but they just didn't know that it had already taken off, so they weren't prepared to be in the seat to drive it yet. That actually makes way more sense, holy shit. Anyways, Meowth, Jesse, and James instantly go up, and they find the manual in the cockpit, and Meowth tries to read it so they can figure out how to stop all the tilting that was happening. Okay, how the fuck did they not know how to stop the tilting, though? Like, if they were assigned to be the drivers by Giovanni, he should have at least told them that. I mean, I know he was trying to kill them, but damn. Anyways, before Meowth can get any useful information out of the manual, the ship then tilts forward again, launching Team Rocket forward in their seats. Thankfully, though, Meowth is able to eventually get some information, which informs him of the ballast tanks. He explains to James that the tanks needed to be emptied out so that the ship could maintain balance, so James looks for the lever to empty the tanks, and he manages to do so, which soaks the Jigglypuff in the process, who was still hanging on to the rope below the blimp. The Jigglypuff gets angered by the water pouring down on it, and determines that whoever sent this water down must have came from up above, as the water came from up above, so it begins to climb up the rope, hoping to break into the ship and get its revenge. Anyways, due to James not knowing how to properly operate the ballast tanks, even though he did manage to release water, he released too much, and that just causes the blimp to tilt even more. He tried his best to get the perfect amount, but the blimp just kept tilting and tilting and tilting, so he actually just caused more turbulence. However, he does fortunately manage to get the blimp level eventually, presumably by sheer luck, but I hesitate to call Team Rocket lucky, as right after they do this, it's revealed that a storm was approaching, and they were heading straight for it. Great! James tries his best to release more water from the tanks in order to have the blimp manage to avoid the storm, but unfortunately, he had messed around with it so much that there was now no water left in the tanks. Great, so now they were truly stuck heading for the storm. Meanwhile, Jigglypuff had successfully managed to climb up the rope and managed to jump into the blimp through one of its little tank holes. Back inside the cockpit, Jesse and James were panicking on what the fuck to do to get out of the storm when Meowth noticed a red button on the wall, and he matched it up with a red button in the manual, which let him know that pushing it would let all the gas out of the blimp, and in doing so, the blimp would crash down into the ocean, thus avoiding the storm. James begins to get upset, though, as he points out that, sure, they would miss the storm, but the blimp would fucking crash into the water, meaning that they could fucking die. So they might as well take their chance with the storm. James also panics because he fears that even if they did manage to survive, they would get killed by Giovanni as punishment for damaging his blimp. Although, he obviously wasn't aware that Giovanni was planning to kill him anyways. Jessie then rebuttals both of James' worries, as she says that they would be probably more likely to survive if they had a slow descent into the ocean, as opposed to being ripped apart by the storm, and she also clarifies that Giovanni likely wouldn't care about the blimp being destroyed if they managed to steal a Pokémon in the process, referring to Ash's Pikachu, unaware that Giovanni did not care about them stealing Pokémon at all, and that's why they were assigned to the blimp in the first place. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, they were constantly dealing with all of the tilting going on, thanks to Jesse and James, and they were getting sick of constantly falling over and having to get back up. Misty had almost passed out at this point due to all the turbulence, so she accidentally mistakes Togepi for a weird sculpture on board that was of similar shape and size. When she realizes, though, that she was mistaken and that this sculpture wasn't Togepi, she realizes that Togepi must have gone missing in the chaos of all the tilting and begins to panic. She bitterly demands that Ash and Brock help her look for Togepi, and they instantly agree, probably scared of Misty, since she seemed to go fucking delirious. Like, how do you mistake a fucking sculpture for a living creature, man? What the hell? Anyways, Ash and the gang look for Togepi in various places across the entire ship. Or at least the main floor, as Pikachu helps them look as well. Ash looks in a trash can, Brock looks in the fireplace, absolutely nothing. During all this, the Jigglypuff had successfully arrived aboard the blimp, and managed to get itself caught in a tablecloth as it was walking. Anyways, due to not finding Togepi on the main floor of the blimp, Ash then climbs up a ladder, with Brock and Misty soon following him. Immediately, this proves to be as useless as the first floor was, as they aren't able to find anything, when suddenly they spot a small white figure in the distance. Misty believes that this is Togepi, but as they approach closer to it, they in fact realize that it was not Togepi, but a random white creature that they'd never seen before. They then remember the workers telling them about the ghost story, and conclude that it must be a ghost, and run away in fear. Unbeknownst to them, that this ghost was actually Jigglypuff wrapped in the tablecloth. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was now looking around the blimp, once again leaving it with no driver, as they walked along a catwalk looking for Ash and the gang so that they could steal Ash's Pikachu, which they believed would make Giovanni not mad at them for inevitably crashing the blimp. Like how Ash and the gang were having trouble looking for Togepi though, James and Jesse were having trouble looking for Ash and the gang, and they commented with frustration on where the fuck they could have went, as they literally just saw them like 10 minutes ago at this point, and now they were gone. I don't know, maybe try the first floor? Did you already try the first floor? Why'd you go straight to the second floor? Anyways, Meowth then remembers overhearing those two workers talking about the ghost story, and suggests to Jesse and James that maybe Ash and the gang were killed by ghosts after all. This leads Jesse to get pissed off, and she proceeds to beat up Meowth for even making the suggestion, claiming that there was obviously no way that ghosts could be real. However, right as they say this, Jigglypuff in the tablecloth approaches them from behind, and they immediately panic, believing it to be a ghost, just as Ash and the gang did, and they begin running away from it. The ferocity of their running creating so much wind that it, unbeknownst to them, blew the tablecloth off of Jigglypuff, revealing its true form. Just then, back with Ash and the gang, they notice the blimp get hit by lightning, as it was now fully in the storm at this point, and this leads Ash and Brock to panic, as they suggest that they should find a way to escape the blimp before it inevitably crashes down. However, Misty instantly denies them with anger, reminding them that Togepi was priority number 1, and they had to find it. Just as they get up from the ground, having fallen from the lightning, to resume their search though, Team Rocket then show up. They had found them. They proceed to do their motto as usual, bragging about how they were going to steal Pikachu, without even revealing the fact that they were the ones who were supposed to be driving the blimp. But their motto gets interrupted as there's so much fucking turbulence with the storm going on, which pisses them the fuck off, so they just decide to go straight into the battle, sending out their Arbok and Weezing, as Meowth demands them to hand over Pikachu. Arbok, however, isn't able to do anything really, as soon as Jesse orders it to use Bind, Pikachu just counters with its basic-ass Thunder Shock, which not only shocks Arbok, but everyone in Team Rocket. Ash instantly celebrates, thinking he got the win, but Team Rocket ain't done yet. Ash tries to go in for another Thunder Shock, thinking it would be as easy, but Misty warns him not to do so, because too much electricity could cause the blimp to crash. But I mean, to be fair, the blimp was set to crash anyway. With Ash being unable to use Pikachu, his strongest Pokemon at this point, aside from Charizard obviously, Brock decides to get involved and send out his Geodude, which attacks Weezing. Weezing and Geodude appear to be relatively evenly matched at first, but Geodude manages to get the upper hand as it picks Weezing up and throws him. However, when he throws him, this causes Weezing to rip a hole in the blimp. One hole being ripped, in turn causes a lot of the rest of the blimp's protection to be blown off as well, just creating even more and more holes, bringing even more and more wind into the blimp. Ash and the gang direct their attention over to the damaged area, wanting to find a way to fix it, but all they find is Misty's Togepi walking on a ledge. As Team Rocket get depressed that Ash and the gang had taken their attention off of them, Misty then proceeds to climb up a nearby ladder to try and reach the ledge to get Togepi, who had now walked across the ledge and was standing directly in front of one of the holes, about to fall out. Ash, by this point, then sent out his Bulbasaur to try and use its Vine Whip to reach for the Togepi from down below as well. However, this was useless, and the blimp then started to shake violently, tilting even more. This led Misty to start shaking as she was walking on the ledge, so Ash changed his Bulbasaur's directions, instead now ordering it to use Vine Whip on Misty so the Vine Whip could keep her steady. As if things weren't chaotic enough right now, Jesse and James note the fact how Ash and the gang were currently distracted by everything going on with Togepi, and know that this would be their perfect chance to steal Pikachu. So, they plan to get up to one of the blimp's steel beams that had been revealed when a lot of its protection came off, and climb across the steel beam, and then jump down and steal Pikachu, catching Ash and the gang off guard. However, Jesse and James, knowing that the wind could blow them off at any second on a beam that thin, they angrily suggest that Meowth be the one to do it. Meowth reluctantly agrees out of his sheer determination to get Pikachu, and he begins to climb across the beam like monkey bars. Coincidentally though, as soon as Meowth grabs on, that's when the blimp comes out of the storm into pure sunlight, and since all of the blimp's protection was blown off, there was nothing stopping the sunlight from coming in and blinding Meowth, so he couldn't see where he was going. Because of this, he begins to panic and loses his grip. This means that Team Rocket then actually decide to put their own lives at risk for once to save Meowth as they try and go up the beam to save him. While this was going on, Misty had successfully made it to Togepi and was about to pick it up, but then Jigglypuff appeared out of nowhere and jumped in the middle of them and was preparing to sing. God damn, there's a lot of chaos going on at once. I hope you guys are able to follow all of it. Now, it couldn't possibly get any worse, right? Well, yes it could, because then the blimp started to wobble yet again, as way too many holes had been ripped in the blimp at this point. This wobbling causes not only Jigglypuff to fall off of the blimp, but Team Rocket as well. As once again, there were so many holes that there was barely any ground beneath them for them to land on, so they just ended up falling out straight into the water. However, before they fell into the water, Meowth successfully managed to grab some of the paper used in the blimp and transform it into a makeshift parachute in a Deus Ex Machina moment. This is the only Deus Ex Machina moment Team Rocket would have today though, as the Jigglypuff, who had fallen out of the blimp also, then lands on the parachute and begins to sing as it had originally planned, and this causes Team Rocket to fall asleep and drop the parachute as they fall into the water, therefore being lost at sea. Meanwhile, back on the blimp with Ash, Misty, and Brock, with Jigglypuff being flown off, there was nothing to stop Misty from grabbing Togepi and returning down from the ledge with Bulbasaur's aid. Misty wasn't able to hug Togepi for long though, as one last unfortunate event happens, being the blimp's gas starting to leak out of the tanks. Brock's like, oh shit, we need the land, and suggests that they all send out their Pokemon and use them as an alternative to the ballast tanks, as they each get on each side, and it successfully manages to balance out the blimp enough to allow them to crash land. Every Pokemon at their disposal had pitched in, but they had done it. They had made it to land, finally, they didn't die. As a result, though, the blimp was now totally unsalvageable, completely fucked. And along with that, Ash and the gang panicked as they didn't know where they landed. It could have just landed on some fucking random-ass island. But fortunately for them, a PA system then sounds from outside the blimp, informing them that they had arrived on none other than Valencia Island. Well, that's convenient.